If I asked you how you got to the place you're in right at this moment, you'd start with, well, I was here, took a turn right there, changed path there, took a detour as the road was closed, and finally I got to this place, or some other variation of that. Simple, right? Explaining how we got to a certain specific place through directions is very similar to how we get from one point in history to the present. Events, much like directions, have a history, a point of origin, context, subsequent in-between events, all within a structure that in hindsight is shaped within a larger and longer story. But when it's the historical or current storytelling of events that shape the dynamic between the United States and the West and the rest of the world, and in our case, Arabs and Muslims, this isn't such an easy task. It's basically a minefield. How when one attempts to explain how we arrived at the present is not always so simple, but often conflated with justifying the final event, which in most cases has substantial emotion associated with it. And this is the dilemma. We want to explain to help someone understand why certain events have taken or are taking place. But we find resistance when it's from the point of view of Arabs and Muslims, because Western explanations impose themselves as analysis on every listener, while Arab or Muslim explanations sound like bias or sympathy, and hence found guilty as justification. Now, it's crucial we're all aligned when we're talking about explaining and justifying, that they both mean the same things to each and every one of us, so let's address their definitions. Explaining is an act of illumination. It says, here's how we got here. It traces causes, histories, and decisions without necessarily approving or condemning them, and without any personal emotion or opinion. Justifying, on the other hand, is an act of defense. It says, this was right, or at least was acceptable. It tries to morally validate an action, no matter how necessary or unnecessary such validation was required. Okay, since these terms are all cleared up now, let's dive into some real examples in Western media when the phenomenon of accusing justification quickly overwhelms and even sometimes bullies away even the simplest notions of explanation. Let's take the War on Terror, for example. Driven by an alliance of Western hegemonic nations, it was, after all, an effect, an endeavor triggered by the events of September 11. Everyone condemned the attacks. Every Arab and Muslim nation did. But if anyone stepped outside that narrative line of condemnation, that was it. They were put into a category of 9/11 justifiers and so sympathizers. There's a moment perfectly reflecting this situation with Tariq Ramadan, the Swiss Muslim academic and philosopher. In a 2005 interview on the BBC's Hard Talk show, Ramadan is asked by host Stephen Sacker what his views are concerning the 9/11 attacks. Ramadan explicitly condemns them, and then attempts to explain the broader contexts of wars. The United States' unwavering support for Israel, unjust foreign policy encroached upon Arab and Muslim sovereignty, as an explanation to the evolution of people's psyches and emotions when they're suppressed for extended periods of time. Sacker's tone shifts. The moment Ramadan moves from condemnation to explanation, you witness the questioning of Ramadan becoming sharper, almost prosecutorial. Almost as if he's no longer just being asked what happened, but where he's being tested for hidden sympathies towards those who committed such acts, the terrorists. With such dynamics happening across Western media over and over again, Arabs and Muslims become cordoned off within a small and specific box, one where Islam, violence, and terror are lumped together. And so, Arab, Muslim, and Islam are all associated in violence. The war on terror then gets repositioned as a war on Islam. The next example I'd like to address a little bit more generically, because it's been the case for the better part of a century, and it deals with the American-Israeli entanglement and how it clashes with Arabs. It's quite an extreme case, as in this conversational scenario, there's no opportunity for explanation. It's immediate. Are you justifying this event or not?
Do you condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th?
But do you condemn Hamas?
Do you condemn Hamas?
The "do you condemn Hamas" moment tries to validate whether you might try to justify the events of October 7th. And when every Western media personality starts with this question, and specifically when targeting an Arab counterparty in an interview or panel discussion, they want to challenge integrity. Because once Hamas and their acts are condemned, a datum point is established that Hamas and Palestinians en masse are terrorists, are violent, inhumane, with no moral ground to stand on. If you ignore that damning question, they'll demand again and again, do you condemn Hamas? And if you happen to resist, then every explanation of yours afterwards gets positioned as a justification, and within that conversation will be considered morally questionable. From the coalition of the West and Israel's perspective, no explanations are acceptable. No neutral narration of facts and events giving context, because then that would trigger sympathy, and no sympathy for the Palestinians or Arabs is admissible. This isn't an Israel-only strategy, but one of all Western nations who support it. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button. And for all of those of you who want to show their support for the channel, check out our membership programs on YouTube or on Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. The last example to explain, is the general American perception that Muslims in all shapes and forms hate the United States for what they stand for their freedoms, their liberty, so on and so forth. All culminating in how Americans cannot believe how anyone would chant, "Death, death to America." Why would anyone hate the Americans and wish death upon them?
What does Iran get for literally calling for our destruction? You see, the Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, well, he said death to America this past weekend. I mean, listen for yourself.
Well, let's use Iran as a specific case. They've been lumped wholesale in the first two examples I provided. On the micro level, Western media accommodates the narrative of Iran being violent, aggressive, and a terrorist nation. And when it comes to Israel, Iran is positioned as the source of all the region's troubles and instabilities. But when we look at Iran's individual history with the West and the United States in particular, there's a lot more explaining that can be done. One can delineate a path of explanations resulting in an understanding of how the death to America came to be. The colonial siphoning of its natural resources by the British, the overthrow of a democratically elected leader, Mossadegh, by the British and the CIA, the support of the Shah up to the revolution with a blind eye to corruption and oppression. The chain is clear. Western media, though, doesn't want explanations. It doesn't want to address its own nation's miscalculations, immoral behavior, or their ongoing imperialistic impositions, and definitely no discussions of past or current accountabilities. And if you so much as try to explain this past concerning Iran, you're a terrorist sympathizer. You support a nation that wants to annihilate the entirety of the American people. As much as this last thought is untrue and as unlikely as this is, the death headline is what is positioned front and center. No Western media wants to hear explanations from Arabs or Muslims. No stories desired revealing how inhuman or unjust the West was and is. And so explaining historic events that could shed light on certain situations is taboo. It's quite an asymmetric equation, because in most Arab cases, when they explain, the clarity and extremity of those experiences come through, while in parallel, the immorality of the Western counterparty shines bright. Sympathy is created, and that again is a no-no. They want the damning caption and accuse all others who attempt to explain with reasoning that they're justifying, so that the truth remains hidden. Once an explanation is positioned as justification, then it's as if that explanation has lost all credibility and thus no longer necessary even for completion. All with the intention to maintain a Western self-serving fog of public opinion and never, ever being held to account. The thing about this phenomenon is that it has other hidden effects, conclusions that serve Western narratives, that predominantly something Arab or Muslim is inherently not to be trusted or even evil, something to fear. Why? Because for some reason or other, Arabs and Muslims hate the West, either due to their faith or maybe due to them being a different breed of human. Ultimately, this is all about prioritizing certain narratives while suppressing others. Yet, what is not being recognized is how this approach of accusing others of justifying certain events while preventing them from explaining them creates all sorts of moral collapse as well as fear and hatred. Censorship, Islamophobia, stereotype reinforcement, supremacy in the form of anti-Semitism. It's truly unbelievable and sad, with all that I have just mentioned, how the more Arab and Muslims try to explain reality and the consequential conditions of their current psyche, the more dangerous explanations become. And in that danger, only oversimplification survives, and the Western narrative endures.